Welcome to a special episode where we caught up with three former interviewees, Mel Cole in Abu Dhabi, Tonya in Jamaica, and Jessica in Nigeria. All are relatively new to international education and thrive in their chosen environments. All three regaled us with stories of their adventures and gave us insights into ways to milk every moment of the overseas lifestyle. You can listen to their individual interviews if you missed them. Mel and Cole were in episode 13. Tonya was in episode 29, and Jessica was in episode 31. Our guiding question for this update episode was, based on the past school year, how is your experience of international teaching going? To help answer this question, our no longer newbies answered the following subquestions. What were one or two high points from the past school year? Do you have a low point to share? What are the next steps for you? Do you have any sage advice for aspiring international teachers on recruiting, interviewing, transition prep, or doing your own version of orientation? This show was recorded on May 11th, 2024. Enjoy this rich episode full of nuggets of wisdom from these intrepid teacher travelers.
Hello, ladies. Welcome to the Educators Going Global podcast again for a second time. Yay! So this is a show that Audrey and I have been talking about for quite some time. And knowing it would be multiple people joining us, we fretted a little bit about trying to connect everyone, but it's all worked out. Audrey pulled it off in the end, and we really appreciate your coming on. So let's jump right into some going global stories. And let's go with Jessica first. What do you have for us, Jessica?
So I'm coming to the end of my first year living in Abuja, Nigeria. And we live in teacher housing, which is in the same compound as our school. And I had a moment sitting out on my balcony on a Saturday morning, calling home to Australia, which is the best time to get family and friends back home, sitting and chatting. And I'm watching across the wall of our compound, there's a grassy area and a local village. And I'm watching one of the local herding tribes called the Fulani herd their cattle through. And then all of a sudden, this little boy jumps on a tree and grabs each side of it, and he hoists his way all the way up to the top. And he was quite a small little thing. And I thought, oh, look at him. He's having a break from being busy with cattle herding, and he's just climbing a tree like all children want to do. Then he gets a machete out of his side pocket and he starts hacking off all the branches and all the leaves, and all the cows rush in. It's a known thing to them that he cuts all the leaves down for them so that they can have a little bit of an extra feed. And I just sat there going, yeah, I'm not in Kansas anymore. So that's my glow story.
Oh, my. Oh, my. Thank you for that. All right, Mel, how about you?
I don't think mine is quite as wild as that, but Cole and I actually both work on this program with students called the Duke of Edinburgh. And it's where we take kids to be ambassadors for the school, and they learn leadership skills and also hiking and outdoor skills with it. And we were going out into the mountains here in Ras Al Khaimah, and it was really beautiful because we're just going for this walk, and these men come pulling up in their big Pajeros or big patrol trucks and cars. And they walk up to us, and, as these little women, like we're pretty small ladies, and then Cole's off in the distance somewhere, but a couple ladies and myself were like looking at these men, and we're like, what is going on? And they come up to us with these big baskets of food, and they just are like wanting to shower us with food and show their love and appreciation for what we're doing with these students with food. And we're looking at it like, this is a very strange experience because, you go hiking in the woods in Canada and it's nothing like that. Nobody's going to come up to you. If they come up to you with food, you might be like, what's going on? No, I'm not going to take any. But here it's like one of those things where it's very culturally accepted to, take food from these people because it's really their appreciation that they're trying to share with you. And it was just a beautiful thing for us to be part of. So it was really cool.
Well, that community outreach is one of the big mantras that we talk about on the show. So that's pretty cool that happened with you. All right, Tonya, how about you?
Yeah, mine is pretty soon after I got here. It came to my attention that my hair does not do well in the humidity. So I was struggling with my hair, and a lot of women down here have braids. So I was like, that would be really cool. So I talked to another teacher that's a friend of mine and arranged to go to her sister's neighbor's apartment kind of situation to get my hair braided. So I went there. It was awesome. We were up a couple, maybe the third or fourth floor in an apartment. And, the whole family's there kind of running around, lots of kids and stuff, because it takes like 6 hours. So you're there for a while. So we're sitting on her balcony and everyone's speaking patois. So I have no idea. I'm just like the random girl that's there that everyone's confused about. But she was like maybe halfway through when we had an earthquake, like a pretty significant earthquake. And we're up here on this balcony and I'm like in these strangers' home, like, oh my goodness. So it was kind of a bonding experience for me and the two ladies that were doing my hair. So anyway, it turned out really cool. I enjoyed the braids for like a month. And now one of my running routes goes past their apartment. So I always, holler at them from the road. And we've become good friends because I think we like trauma bonded through the earthquake. But I will caution against doing this because my hair still has not recovered, as we have much more fragile hair. But I'm still glad I did it because it was really a cool experience and it helped me to connect with people here and my students and stuff. So.
Well, good on you. Trauma bonding, and I wish I was in a position to have hair to have it braided myself, to go down that avenue. All right, so let's keep going, and I'm going to share the guiding question and share with our audience that our intent here is two of you are in your first year, and then we get to Mel is in her second year, but to, as teachers, share some of the lessons that you've learned and you're becoming international educators. So that's the kind of the big picture as we move into our guiding question, which is based on the past school year, how is your experience of international teaching going? And Audrey's going to pick it up from there.
Yeah. So, how about you share one or two high points from the past school year? And we'll start with Tonya on this one.
It was definitely a challenge to narrow it down to one or two because looking back on the year, there's been so many incredible things that have happened. I think I would have to start with just talking about the running community here because for me, that's a big part of my life. And so I'm in Kingston, Jamaica, if anyone doesn't know. And so there's a lot of people, just incredible people and community that I've met through training for and then going and competing in these very large and well done 5Ks. Not like what you're thinking of, maybe, if you have gone to a local 5K, but the whole city really comes out and enjoys it. And so you just get to experience a lot of culture. And for me, that was nice to have another community outside of just the school community, which is amazing as well. But, to make those additional connections. Some things that stand out to me through the school year is really leading up to the Christmas holidays. There was a lot of events and performances and things that I got to do for the first time, kind of Jamaican traditions and things. And then, of course, the school I'm at, AISK, is very arts oriented. So incredible art and dance and music performances by the students. That was a highlight. And then I made gingerbread houses with my students, which was the first time a lot of them had experienced that, which is one of my traditions. So I think Christmas highlights it best, but really what it is all year long is just sharing those experiences that are new for each other and getting to enjoy that.
I love it that you've dived into the community and made a lot of connections and embraced some of the local traditions and brought your own in all in one fell swoop. Great work. So, how about you, Jessica?
Again, hard to narrow it down. I think I was pretty delighted to arrive and be able to access an allocated PD budget, a professional development budget. And I had done a little bit of prior research, and as a drama teacher, I needed to fit it in around my annual production. And so the very first school holidays, I jetted off to Scotland and I went to a 1-week conference which lapped over the end of the school term and the first few days of the holidays. And it was just incredible to have that all covered by my school, just something you could never have dreamed possible as a standard teacher back in Australia. And being alone in a school as a drama teacher, it's nice to go and play with fellow drama teachers. So that was a very rewarding experience. I have to say the students here are absolutely incredible. Many of them are very, very eager to learn and very, very bright. And that's everything I'd hoped I would find in an international school. I've also made a lot of friends. There's that little crossover you've got to learn to navigate where the parents of your children that you teach are often your friends and the ones you see in the evenings. And we have a lot of friends at the embassy compound next door, a very large compound, and we're fortunate that they stage a lot of events. And we've been able to secure membership. So we flick back and forth through the gate between our two compounds and have quite a busy life with lots of events on offer, which has been really lovely for our family.
Wow, it really sounds like you've had some great adventures. And again, getting into the local community is such a valuable part of this international teaching. And then the travel, whoop, whoop, how sweet that you got to go to Scotland. I love it. How about you, Mel?
You know, it's super cool. I just got back from Scotland too, so I understand the hype about it. It's beautiful, 100% would recommend. But honestly, like being here now for 2 years, even in your first year, I'm sure all of us would agree, the travel is incredible. Being in another country, the access to different places is really cool, places you would never get to go to. So for me, I started here as my very first country that I had ever been to in the UAE. And now I've hit 20 countries. And for me, the travel's been absolutely incredible. Yeah, it's super cool. I was such a baby traveler before and like terrified of traveling too. So I feel like I've grown so much from the travel alone, seen so many places. It's been really cool. And I'm sure all the ladies would agree as well. Travel's just, that's why we're doing this. It's really for the experience. Cole and I also moved to a different area, which has been really cool for us. We've experienced more of an expat lifestyle with people who are similar to us, have dogs like us, so we can go for walks with them. It's very nice. And then we've just created a community that's become a family. It's really, really beautiful that have experiences with people who have been here for 10 plus years. And those people really are experts at living the expat life. And they've shown us the ropes and they've become people who we go to for everything. So I think having those connections has been really great and definitely a high point for myself.
Fantastic. And absolutely, once again, the connections, the community, and the travel. And in 2 years, you did 20 countries. If you kept that average going, 10 per year, and you do 30 years abroad like I did, you're talking 300 countries. That's sweet. I hope you keep it up.
Me too.
And that hits on one of the criteria on our blog post, our spreadsheet about how to look at different schools, different countries, that sometimes we forget. When you're looking at the Middle East, several of these city-states are huge travel hubs. So it's easy to get on a plane and go someplace. And then for Jessica, I was going to mention, it really is a special experience when you are close to an embassy and that embassy identifies with your school. That's a really extra perk for sure. And Tonya, bringing in the running, and that's something that you're going to probably be able to do wherever you live as you go around the world. So that's going to be a neat world cultural experience that you're going to have. So good on you there. All right, so we got to turn 180 degrees and hit on the low point. So let's just aim for one. Mel, do you have a low point that you all have experienced in the last 2 years?
Yeah, I think this is something that, again, we all experience as teachers teaching internationally, is you will miss out on those big life events with people. And for me, unfortunately, my Oma had passed away this past year. And I mean, it's a big experience that, you want to be there for your family, your friends, and people who experience a loss. And it's hard, but you know what? You accept those things going into international teaching, and you learn how to adapt to those situations as an international teacher, and you learn how to cope in different ways and grieve in different ways. And it makes you a stronger person, I think. But it is difficult, and I would never sugarcoat that, but it's the reality of being abroad.
Yes, it is. And thanks for sharing that. That's a very difficult experience to go through. And there are options from time to time for folks to be able to take leave if it is something that can be done. So that's something to keep in mind for people who are looking about going overseas and just wonder about that. to keep that in mind. All right, Tonya.
Mine would be I did get dengue last fall. I was pretty sick for a week, and then you have that experience of being in a strange hospital and kind of a little bit worried because it's not a, illness that you're kind of familiar with. But of course, I recovered. I think that it was an additional challenge for me because while I was sick, the school, like I think Melanie said, everyone was really looking out for me and bringing me soup and checking on me. And I really felt the love at that time of everyone that I have gotten to know here reaching out to help me out during that time. But I think it created a little bit of homesickness because I wasn't able to socialize and do all my excessive amount of activities that I've gotten involved in. So that sort of period of recovery for me was probably the low point. And it was also eye-opening because it does, I think the lesson there is, of course, when you do have the opportunity, really trying to say yes to things and really making the effort to make connections, because it sort of showed me how, you could do this, take this leap to go overseas, and then you could find yourself, if you didn't have those connections, really isolated. So darn those mosquitoes, but we're back. Don't worry.
Darn those mosquitoes, that is for sure. And for folks thinking about medical care and medical insurance, definitely check out our Educators Going Global website that has articles on those topics to look into those as well. All right, Jessica.
Actually, interesting. The two low stories I wrote down as options were what Mel and Tonya just covered. So I'll just sort of add to what they've both said. I also lost my grandfather this year, and it was while I was here. So I was dealing with how do you remotely grieve? How do you still connect? So I would just say on that, I learned to advocate for myself and to really gently push family to say, look, it's really important to me if you could get a live stream organized. And the school was so supportive. They gave me a bereavement day. And I just sat at my kitchen table and just sobbed through the ceremony. And, it was just lovely to feel like I was still a part of it. And so that was an important process to go through and to realize, I knew that that was coming and it was something that can be navigated and you can support yourself through it, even remotely. And then we had some health issues. Damn mosquitoes here too, Tonya. We got malaria. We've had typhoid twice. I've never been so sick in a year, I have to say. And you learn how to keep yourself well. You learn how to navigate the health systems. You learn that we have excellent healthcare, and I'm very grateful for that. And we've bounced back and we're ready for a nice big summer holiday now.
Well, glad to hear you've bounced back. I know that as a family, you guys were sick for a wee while there. So that's certainly no fun, especially if, as the parent, you're sick and the kids are sick and you don't feel like you can give them as much care as you'd prefer, when you're sick yourself as well. But so let's move on to what is coming up next for each of you, because you've sort of in a way just begun your adventures and we're wondering what your thinking is now, because originally when you went overseas, you might have been thinking, this is it, this is my career. Maybe you're having second thoughts now, or maybe you're even more on fire about it. So let's start with you, Jessica.
So we made the decision before we left Australia that the first big summer break, we would cash in our return flights home and we would spend them on flights to Europe. So we pre-warned our families they wouldn't see us for 2 years. And we let our children know this is a big part of the reason why we're doing this is we want to have easier access to the world. And we want to show you guys the world. My husband and I didn't see the world until we entered it as adults and funded it ourselves. So we wanted to have that opportunity. And so that's finally approaching. So, to have the ability to take our children for 6 weeks to Europe, and we're traveling through 5 different countries and staying with friends and cousins and visiting cities. The kids got to pick a bucket list city each that they want to visit. So we're very excited about that. I'm also looking forward to directing my first musical next year when I get back and working out how to get a local choreographer or one through a computer screen to support me with that, being the actor, not the dancer in the equation. And I'm a big one for continuing to professionally develop myself. So I'm already looking at professional development opportunities for next year, choosing between the Principal Training Centre leadership course or maybe Google Education level 1 or 2, or there's an IB course I'm looking at doing with a colleague. So lots of options.
Fantastic. You really are grabbing the experience with both hands and diving in. 6 weeks in Europe, what an experience for your kids. And they're just at that age where they can enjoy that and remember it the rest of their lives. So good on you. Fantastic. And then, yeah, PD is also a huge advantage, a big benefit of teaching in these international schools. A lot of times there's good PD funding. So that's really great to hear. I'm excited for you as the summer vacation approaches. How about you, Tonya? What are your next steps?
Immediate next steps, I think we all have summer on the mind as teachers getting there. So for me, I'm very excited to go back to Alaska for the summer and see my family. But as far as looking a little farther ahead, I'm definitely someone that has really found, a less cliche way to say this, but kind of found my calling with the teaching overseas. I love the adventures. I love the people. It's been an incredible year for me, both in and out of the classroom. And so now it's just the challenge of I want to be everywhere all at once. So kind of navigating that next step of how long do you stay in a place you love versus when is the right time to, go try another country. And I haven't quite figured that out, but I'm certainly looking forward to a lot more international schools ahead of me.
So well put, because that really is a challenge that people face, should I stay or should I go kind of thing. So, yeah, it's great. What is your thinking on your next steps, Mel?
Well, Cole and we've decided that we're going to stay next year. So we're going to go into our third year of teaching here abroad, which is super exciting. We went from 1 year to maybe 2 years to now for sure 3 years. There's just too much to do, too much to see. I feel like we just got the travel bug, the international teaching bug. And, sometimes we think like, well, we could go to Japan next, or we could go to Korea next, or wherever. So it's super exciting. The doors kind of open for us, which is amazing. I'm super excited for it. I don't really have solid plans for the future beyond next year. So really the next step is going to see friends and family this summer and trying to figure out who we can give the most time to. And it'll be pretty exciting. But really the next step is just seeing where next year takes us. Cole's really involved in an initiative to replant mangrove seeds and mangrove trees here. So he's going to keep working with a project that's doing that with the government. And then I've been just trying to get a little bit more involved with the community in terms of how I teach, getting my students to write local organizations letters and things. So just kind of navigating the world here a little bit more closely is really nice. So those are kind of the next steps here for us.
I love the way you're kind of giving back and getting into local initiatives. That's fantastic. And I empathize with you. I initially went to Ethiopia for a year and then became 2. And then next thing you know, I blinked and it had been 30 years of teaching internationally. And then we came home and guess what? Now we're going back. So it really, like you said, it just so gets in the blood.
And we have Jessica and Mel as writers, and both of you, I've read some of your work online. And Mel, you've been very upfront about not being so sure about coming overseas. And it's very interesting to hear how you've come with a growth mindset and you're finding avenues to reach out to the greater community. And Cole is definitely, sounds like getting involved in the greater community as well. So that's pretty neat, that transformation, to see where it takes you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's put you all on the spot a little bit now as international educators, and what sage advice that you would offer for people probably going overseas in August or thinking about it. And we're going to break it down into some categories. We'll start off with recruiting. What is a tip or two that you can draw from your experience regarding recruiting? And Tonya, why don't we start with you?
Sounds good. I think the main thing I would throw out there is to just have an open mind. I mean, maybe you want a little bit more direction than I had going in, because I know a lot of people are interested in specific countries and kind of have a sort of a loose plan or loose vision of what they're looking for. But I kind of just went in completely clueless, maybe. And well, I'm not sure I would recommend that to everyone. it really did work out for me because I found a place that I love. And I think sometimes you'd be surprised where you can find if you're willing to just say, hey, let me just try an interview and just see what these people have to say. But yeah, that would be the main one. And I guess if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably already, a little bit on your way. But the big advice I would be giving people is just don't be afraid to try it. If you're not loving your job, if you're not too old, you're not, you kind of have to second guess yourself. Like, do I have enough teaching experience? Do I have enough world experience? And the bottom line is people are going to help you out and you're going to get that experience along the way. So I think you just have to go for it.
And to add to that, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but if you're teaching in Canada, in the US, you don't sign your new contract for the upcoming year till late in the current school year. You've got a lot of time. And for folks who maybe are just listening to one of our shows for the first time, the international recruiting really begins, well, now I guess we could say the end of August barely starts, and then September really starts rolling. And you might know before January 1st if you've got some offers, but it definitely rolls into January, February. So you got a lot of time to be like Tonya said, okay, let me see what happens. If something doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Or if you get an offer or two that you don't like, you can say no and just stay where you are in your home country. So that's something to keep in mind as well. All right, Jessica, what do you have to say on this topic of recruiting?
I would say my belief in the power of the hiring international fair is still very strong. And so, if you're in any doubt about whether or not it's worth it and you're thinking about entering this lifestyle, do it. So, all of my contracts have actually landed after attending fairs and having interviews in person. I've had many, many job interviews online and second interviews online, but the ones that have actually turned into contracts is after I've gone to a fair. I've met someone face to face. We've felt each other's energy, had some rapport, and then that's when a contract lands. And I just saw that happen for some friends who have been teaching here for 6 years in Abuja, Nigeria, and they went to the Bangkok Fair run by Search Associates, the agency that I use as well. And they had a number of offers that they were choosing between at the end, and they've decided to go to Saudi Arabia. So my belief in the fair stays strong, and I've got my eye on that Bangkok Fair in a few years' time.
Sounds good. And Bangkok is a winner if you ask me, because I live there when I'm not in Europe.
You can visit David.
That's right. There you go, in my very tiny condo. All right. How about you, Mel?
Well, I definitely would agree with Tonya. She was just saying that sometimes keeping an open mind is really a great idea. And originally, I wanted to teach somewhere in Europe, like Germany or maybe the Netherlands. And lo and behold, Cole meets a random guy in a spa who says, "Why haven't you thought about the UAE?" And so we applied, and here we are 3 years later almost. So it's kind of funny how things work out. We randomly applied here. I had never even heard of Abu Dhabi before and just worked out. So yeah, definitely keep an open mind. I would say have an online presence too. Looking at things like ISS and Scroll are really, really good, but also look at things like Instagram and Facebook, and people are still using those a lot. I know a lot of schools here advertise their positions on Instagram only. And so having a little bit of an open mindset to go into those things and looking at that is maybe a good idea. And if you've made personal connections already to some educators who are global, keep that connection and see where they are in a couple of years if you feel like you still have the international teaching bug and you want to jump schools or jump countries. And a lot of the time, having that connection abroad is so important. I know some friends who have now gone to Cambodia because they have still those connections. So keep an open mind and keep those friends close too, I'd say.
Network. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Which leads us into a slightly different focus. Let's talk about interviewing. What sage advice have you got? Mel, we'll start with you.
When you are interviewing, I'd say ask questions. Often you think they're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions, but I think it's important that you are asking the right questions too about what the move is going to look like, what reality looks like in another country. Because yes, I've been very open. The first year was very difficult for me to transition from Canada to the UAE. And I wish maybe I had had a little bit more information. And obviously I would never take back this experience. But I think, if I had asked, what could I bring with me that I won't be able to find here? Or what can I do for getting some of my paperwork ready in time, or that kind of stuff. I think if I had asked those questions in an interview, I would have been more prepared for what to expect when I moved abroad.
I love that. I really do think teachers can be a lot more proactive during interviews and not be shy about asking questions. And if you get the sense that they're holding back on you, that can be a red flag to say, if they're not being transparent about some of these things that are important to me, is this a good fit for me? So well put. Tonya, what advice have you got?
I would say the thing that surprised me the most about the interview was how much of it was not focused on school related things, but more focused on them trying to figure out, can I survive alone overseas? So I prepared pretty traditionally how I would prepare, thinking about my pedagogy, thinking about different classroom scenarios and things that I've experienced in interviews that were for the United States. And then their questions were very based on my personality and my interests and, different traveling questions. And so I definitely think you want to have your teaching questions ready, but just be prepared to sort of sell yourself as a person that can adapt in new situations and a person that can make connections and the things that they're looking for to find someone that is going to fit in overseas.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because that can be a little startling for people. Some of the questions, I know in one of our interviews, my husband was asked if he was willing to take out his earring and cut his tail. He had a tail in his hair at the time. Oh, and then they said, are you going to have kids? It's like, wow, these are very personal kind of questions. So yes, being prepared for some of those types of questions is important. Jessica, what is your sage advice for people heading into international interviews?
I would say it's really important that you research the school, but also research the country. I added that on when I went into this very last round. Before I got this position, I had done a lot of research about the country, Nigeria, and the city of Abuja. And I was able to mention that and my willingness to come here, because I felt like I understood some of the things to do with how the country operated and some of the things that had been difficult about the country. And the principal appreciated that I'd taken that extra bit of time, and we spoke a little bit about that. And I think that did make a good impression. Not only I brushed up on my pedagogy and I was ready for the interview and I had a whole heap of questions I wanted to ask him, but I'd also gone to that extra level. And I think that has helped, and I'd certainly do that again. I've also been reading about some best practice with people who have been interviewed and got successful overseas positions many times, and they're talking about having a website. So that's something I'm wanting to do a bit of research into and think about spending the next couple of years setting up a website with examples of my work, examples of student work, examples of me giving feedback to students. So that's something that I'm looking into.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I know some people promote having a digital portfolio, if you will, a website. And I know David and I both have had them. And then there are other people that say, yeah, I don't really. So it's just interesting to see the different. But if you've spoken to several people, that sounds like you've got some good data there. David, over to you.
Yes. So with the portfolio, yes, I built one a long, long time ago. And I've had a couple headmasters, superintendents, principals say, this shows initiative, Dave, and it shares a little bit more about yourself. And I did take a look at it, and I think it puts you maybe one step ahead of other people, and kind of connecting with what Mel's saying. We live in this world of social networking and branding yourself and getting your name out there. So I do think it's worth looking into all of that and finding out. And that's so interesting that you did some research on what do people do who get the jobs that they really want? What are the criteria that they go through to prepare? So I think all that's worth looking into. And it just shows that you're going to go that extra kilometer, and it's well worth it. All right, so let's now move into, I've got a son, if you listen to a few of the shows, Maxwell, the physics teacher, and he has received an offer and he signed the contract, and we're going to do a show with him at some point. And he's in the transition period in the home country of the US. What advice would you give someone like him in preparing, whether it be the documents, mentally, spiritually, socially, whatever, to prepare to go to his new job and new country? Let's start with Jessica for this one.
So I think Mel mentioned this, working out what it is that you can't get in the country you're moving to. And I think that's really important. And I think you've got to add to that what's really important to you. So we found getting here, being Australians, we really value having Vegemite, which is a breakfast spread that my children are addicted to and were raised on. And when that ran out, they were devastated. And so we've had to work out a way, because you can't ship directly into Abuja, Nigeria through the mail. So we've had to work out a way to have a courier service. We buy it in the UK and then we get it couriered here just so they can have Vegemite, because that's just a deal breaker for them.
That's like peanut butter for Americans.
I think so, yes. But my other big piece of advice, and something I find I often discuss with people here, is working out how you're going to manage your financials. So for us, I did research into what sort of a banking card would enable me to use it here in this new country as an emergency, but I could also use it in any other country I went to. And so we use a card called Revolut, which is an e-bank card, and there's another one called Wise, which is quite well known. And they both enable you to run multiple currencies. You can run up to 30 currencies. So we've already used up to 7 different currencies, and we've moved between, South African ZAR when we went to South Africa, and then Ethiopia when we stopped over in Ethiopia, and then we've been able to use it here. I've also used it when I went to Scotland, and learning to navigate. I don't know about the other schools that Mel and Tonya are in, but for me, I'm paid in dual currency. So I've had to learn how to navigate a life where I'm paid in US dollars, and that goes towards things like bills back home or my investment for my future, and then travel money. But then day to day, I live off the Nigerian naira. And so learning to balance that percentage and how we manage our money in both currencies. So that's been a big thing we've navigated, and I think we've done quite well, but it really did make a difference doing that banking research before we came.
Thanks for sharing about the finances. That is the theme that runs through so many of our shows. And I remember with Mel and Cole, they put a lot of thought into that. And one was the banking card. And when they send you those 4-digit codes, how you're going to handle that. So Mel, can you share a few of the tips that you all experienced?
Yeah, David, you totally hit on it, because I was about to mention the exact same thing. Like, it's been so important to us that we figured out our 2-factor authentications before. They're such a big deal. And even now living here, we get OTP passwords all the time. And then sometimes I'll get them from back home. And sometimes I think it might be easier to keep 2 phone numbers if you can, 2 phone lines if you can. Even for going back home this past summer, I noticed it was really nice to have that automatic phone number where I could just click it on and be ready to go. And so for us, those kind of things are really important to hold on to. It just made our lives easier, even for doing things like taxes back home. We still are citizens. We still have to figure that stuff out a little bit. And so having that was really important. Not Vegemite, but having our coffee crisp candy bars was really important to me. So we made sure we had some of those along. And my parents actually visited a couple months ago, and they brought a whole new supply. So maybe just make sure you have lots of visitors who can come and, bring you what you need. Have a lineup of them ready to go. I also think research, again, the country that you're going to, and see if there's things that you love that you can do in the community you're going to be in. So like Tonya had said, she loves running, and that community is super important, obviously, for her. And for myself and Cole, we really love being involved in a community too. But we found a sport called paddle that's similar kind of like to squash and tennis. And so we go and play that. But I think find the things you really have a passion for. And if you can find something similar or something close enough to it where you can create a community, I think, go ahead and look for those things that you think will really make you feel like you have a little piece of home with you.
If I can just add on to what Mel said, something else that we've had to embrace is the eSIM. because I get all the banking passwords and OTPs and things, they come to me. And so having my Australian number as an eSIM on my phone, then just recently I worked out how to get my new Nigerian SIM into an eSIM. And then when we travel, we always buy an eSIM. And I'm just finding it so easy now to be able to turn on and off whichever SIM I want in whichever part of the world and what I need at the time. And getting on board with that has really helped make life easier.
100% agree. Yeah. eSIMs are the way to go if you can.
Thank you for sharing that. That's what I was going to bring up as well. And this is not an advertisement, but as an American, T-Mobile, with one level of their offerings, you can travel the world and get connected wherever you go. So right now I'm in Budapest and I've been traveling through Italy and I'm going to go all over the place. And I will always be able to get my OTPs from the US. And I'm able to make phone calls, Wi-Fi phone calls at no charge. So that's an American thing. And maybe Australia, wherever our listeners are, they can find that. But you're hitting on that eSIM. You're right. That's kind of taken over. So folks, really put some research into that possibility. Thank you. All right, Tonya.
Yeah, I'm probably here to share that it's all part of the adventure mentality, because I needed to hear this podcast, I think, a year ago, because you reminded me with two-factor authentication. Oh my gosh, I have been locked out of every account I have so many times. When I go to the US, I just go phoneless, and I actually kind of love it. But I'm learning things right now because as the newbie, I have a very much it's part of the adventure mentality. And if the IRS is listening, I did get my taxes in, but it was not as smooth as I would have hoped. So yeah, lots of things. But I guess maybe on the flip side of the coin, I would just tell the listeners, like, don't panic. There's a lot of moments where it's like, oh no, I should have done XYZ and I didn't. And now I'm in this situation. You can always get out of the situation. But yes, definitely, if you can get ahead of these things, it'll be a lot smoother process. Sorry, to get back to your question though, as far as transition prep, the one thing that I did that I'm really glad I did is just knowing that I was going to be so far away from my family. I tried to really prioritize time with them. Not everyone has that opportunity, but if you do have the opportunity, I spent a lot more time at home that summer than I had before, and just got to try to really make those memories and have all of that time so that when I was gone for the year, I could at least think back and have those sort of memories to kind of get me through the year. And, I plan to really prioritize that summertime and have those opportunities so that, because you get a little bit of traveler's guilt sometimes, missing out on things like we talked about, being so far away. So I think that's something for me that was really important to do.
And thank you for sharing that social and emotional side and that bonding before you head out. It's so important. I want to refer back to one of the lessons that Mel and Cole shared, because I think I shared it with my son, Max. Mel, if I'm correct, when you all were getting all your documentation verified from your transcripts and things like that, did you get like 2 copies made of everything? And then when you landed, they needed a copy and they didn't have it. It didn't come through. So that is a bit of advice that you would share.
Yeah, absolutely. I would 100% make multiple copies of things if you can, just because you never know. And honestly, thinking ahead too, I probably would have, maybe this is me being paranoid, but I might have even split them up between suitcases or something, just to have them ready in case. You just never know. And a lot of the time going abroad, there are a lot of the you never knows that just happen. So absolutely, I would say do that if you can.
I'm just going to jump in and clarify. You're referring, both of you and David are referring to notarized copies. We're not just talking about throw it in a photocopy. We're talking about stamped with a seal, notarized by whichever body it needs to be, or they call it apostille in some place. So yes, totally 100% agree. You guys had such great tips. I love it. It's fantastic. Honestly, I was a bit like you, Tonya. I just kind of went in pretty blind overseas and just rolled with things as they came. So there's that too. And you do adapt. And that's part of the beauty of the adventure. And I also 100% see the value in planning ahead and having all these things kind of organized ahead. Sometimes schools have better or not as good orientation programs once you arrive. And so we're wondering now if you have any tips or any suggestions about your own version of orientation that maybe the school didn't necessarily take care of for you. And let's start with you, Tonya. Any tips there?
I'm trying to remember back then. It seems so far now. But yes, for me, the school I thought did a really great job of orientation to the country as well as to the school. But of course, in trying to cover everything, it does do that. The analogy of the fire hose, where you don't quite retain it all. That first 2 weeks is like, oh my goodness. But, and this probably seems fairly obvious, but for me, I think it was one, having my own attitude of always ask the question. There's not a stupid question. Ask, and just continue doing that until you really start to hit your groove. But I think it was also helpful that I had a person for everything. So I met a Jamaican teacher that had been here a long time, and I went to her with a lot of my, hey, this student did this, what would you recommend type of questions. I had people outside of school to be like, hey, I got this ticket, how can I pay it? So I kind of had people in every different category that I could go to. And that was really important for me to know I had someone to call for anything. So I would just not hesitate to find those people for you and make sure that you don't feel silly asking those questions.
Yeah, I will reiterate, like you say, don't feel like you're annoying people. Don't feel like you're taking their time. Everybody's there to support you. Everybody's been through it, at least as far as international folks have been through it, and so much empathy and so much patience for all those questions. And I also like that you said you divided them up so that you weren't going to the same well every time. I think that's a brilliant strategy. Plus, different people have different areas of expertise. So that sounds wonderfully done. How about you, Jessica? What tips have you got?
I'd agree with Tonya in that having people to ask your questions of is very important. Living on site here, we have a school group which we can ask school related questions to. And then we have a housing group, and that will include a number of trailing spouses, some who have been here for a few years. And so that's invaluable to be able to access that knowledge across the two groups. But then one very kind teacher also set up a secondary newbies group. And that was really awesome because she just posted little things that blew some of our minds. Like, I think a month in, she did this little video where she grabbed the end of our bed and she hoisted it into the air. And she went, I bet no one told you these things go up and you can put your suitcases underneath. And we all just went, no one did. So that was really helpful. And she's been great. She's actually making all these little helpful videos for the next year. So every year she tries to build on what she shares to help out the next group coming in. But the one big thing I actually wish I had done earlier is the first 6 months are such a whirlwind, but I wish I'd just grabbed someone who'd been here for a while and I'd said to them, hey, where's somewhere that you go? Because it took 6 months to realize there are two little bars, little bush bars in walking distance of our campus. And you can just walk out on a Friday afternoon. And there's a whole group of us now. And we just all walk out and go and get a beer for the afternoon and then come on back when we feel like it. And I wish I'd had that the first 6 months. So that's a good one to ask.
It's always great when you've got that person that just connects people, and having that person that's making those suggestions and is a newbie along with you who can see things through those fresh eyes. And hey, did you think about this? I love that. Tonya, I'm sure you've been to Barbican Beach Bar over there, and that was our Friday afternoon haunt, which was really fun. There's no beach anywhere near, but it has a beach.
It's got
honky tonk beach vibe.
There's a field.
There's a field. So thank you for those tips, Jessica. Mel, have you got any more suggestions to add?
I think both ladies touched on the major points of it. Make connections with people who can help you out, and go find those little places that'll be fun things to do on a Friday afternoon. For me, I think I wish I had just explored the landscape, honestly, a little bit more where I was living. I think my own orientation would have been, going to the grocery store and being familiar with how things are just different, and little things I wish I had known as well. My own orientation would have taught me, I could have gone, and when you go and get your produce here, somebody has to put a tag on it for you. And I didn't know that before. So I think that would have been really cool to know, little things like that. And just being a little bit more familiar, I think, with some cultural nuances would have been really good as well. Oh, I guess Cole's here. I'll let him just jump on in here. I'm sure he's excited.
Nice. So hi, Cole. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Our question is about some tips for newly incoming teachers about any kind of piece of orientation that you recommend people do that isn't necessarily part of the school's orientation, but kind of your own things that you discovered.
Yeah, sure. Let's go right into it and find out. I think the hardest part for us was the simple stuff, like figuring out where we're going to like to buy groceries from, what tastes good. Because there's a few places here that I'm like pass, and a few places that I love. There's things like what area of the city you're comfortable in. Like we have a dog. I'm sure you guys met her already. We ended up living in a place that had dog-friendly walking, and that was huge for us. Before we weren't in such an area
where people didn't really love them as much. So.
And then for me, I just came from an underwater hockey tournament, which I placed gold in.
Humble brag.
Humble brag. Finding those like little rocks, things that you can research, sports you can play. So like our school advocated for if you play hockey, bring your hockey equipment and then you can join the team. I tried a sport called paddle here and I ended up falling in love with it. And then obviously underwater hockey. So the research, that orientation is kind of like what's in the area that you can establish some grounding roots in.
I would also add on to what Mel Cole is saying about cultural nuances. We also reflected that we wish we'd had a little bit of a cultural induction, and that's something they're looking at adding next year. We realised that everyone here says you're welcome, and we weren't sure how to respond to that. And then there's a lot of people around. There's lots of staff and guards and everything. And it was then explained to us that it's actually rude if you don't greet every single person. And it's also not just hi. You need to know that good morning happens between these hours, good afternoon happens between these hours, and then at this particular point in the evening, you must switch to good evening. And so once we learnt that, we realized we just needed to get on board with that and do that with every person because it's expected and it's polite. And that was such an easy little thing, but we just wish we'd known that when we first hit the ground.
Yeah, in Ethiopia, it was knowing that you don't stand in line. And some of you might have experienced this where you're living. And, here we are annoyed with people who are shoving to the front and they're saying to us, yeah, but look, I got served so much faster. You're so wimpy standing in line. And it's just cultural things that it's helpful to know.
Yeah, we don't really do lines here in Nigeria either.
Oh, my. After standing in line for 3 hours in the Dubai airport a few weeks ago during the super rains and the closing of the airport, well, they really weren't lines. It was just bedlam. So that's another story. All right. Well, we're kind of wrapping up here, and we'd like to give you each the opportunity to share one final thought aiming at people who maybe already have that job. They're getting on the plane, maybe flying through the Emirates in August. What last bit of information would you like to share with them? And so why don't we go back to Mel and Cole, since Cole is back with us between the two of you. What can you share with us?
Everything you think it's going to be like, it's not. The first night we landed, we got shown our apartment and like the walls here are concrete instead of wood like they are back home. And for some reason that hit us a little hard. The roofs are way taller than they are back home. These little things that should mean nothing just rolled us
they mean
a little
everything.
Bit. They meant everything.
Yeah, you don't realize.
So understand it's going to happen, that it's not going to be the language that's going to get you or the food. For us, it was the walls and the ceiling that hit us the hardest the first day we landed. And we had to cope that step one.
Yeah. I think also be okay with the highs and lows. You will experience high highs and you'll experience very low lows, and you'll probably have some very happy days and some very tear-filled days as well. So, and just be okay with that. Be okay knowing that days will not just be normal, they will be extremes sometimes. So yeah, I think just expect it.
That's a lot of sage advice right there, because you're leaving, in general, a very comfortable lifestyle when you're a teacher. It can be very difficult to be a teacher in a home country for sure. But when you dive into the international scene, yeah, there are going to be wide swings on the emotional front. And yet, one of the themes running through our discussion today is your community, and you build that community and you lean into that community. All right, Tonya.
I think the last bit of advice I have is that obviously if you're on the plane, you said your big yes, you took the leap and you're going, which is awesome, but continue saying yes. I think there's this temptation when you get into the country, like you kind of did the big thing and then you feel, I don't know, you might take a little bit of time before you really start your adventure, feeling like you have to have a certain level of the language if that's a barrier, or you have to figure out how to navigate and the phone and XYZ. But like the first weekend I got here, I got invited to Lime Key. You probably went, Audrey, but a beach adventure where you have to take a boat and go to this beach and everything. And I just said yes, even though I wasn't unpacked yet. It was like, well, I guess that's why we came. But I think it was cool for me because it really helped me in the long run, actually, just saying yes to as much things as I could and knowing that I'd figure it out along the way versus feeling like I had to be a certain level of, acclimated. So of course you don't want to overdo it and you want to be safe, but within reason, really just continuing to challenge yourself and put yourself out of your comfort zone, even once you arrive.
I like it. We need a t-shirt for that. Just say yes. I like it. All right, Jessica.
I received a good piece of advice from my principal here, actually, and he's Australian, and he was digging out a few little gems when we first arrived, and he said, use the help that's available. He said, I see people come, they enter into this lifestyle, and they think, I still have to do everything. He said, I drive everywhere, I pay all the bills, I do this, and I cook this, and he said, there is help here. And he said, that's a perk of this lifestyle. And he said, so find out what it is that you need and access it and get it in place quickly. And so we had wonderful home help, but then we realized we really did want a chef. And so, because I'm the cook, I love to cook, but in working full time, I wasn't able to give that as much time as I wanted. And so we wanted that support. And so we brought that on. And then the big game changer for us was we realized we needed more help with the kids. And so we brought in a tutor 2 afternoons a week. And that just absolutely changed things. It just meant that we weren't having to parent as well as be the teacher when we came home. I could be a teacher at school, come home, the tutor did a great job, and then I got to just be my kid's parent. And so that was a big thing I'm really glad we did.
Fantastic. I'm really so impressed once again with all of you. Even though these are some of your first experiences, you've really embraced the lifestyle, you've made the connections, you've asked the questions, you've braved some of the twists and turns, and you all sound to me like people who could carry on with this lifestyle of country hopping and travel and embracing new experiences for a good long while. I'm very excited to follow you as you move forward. So one thing that I think might be helpful, since you all have fabulous tips and are so open about sharing your experiences, which I love and which reflects the international community, if you have any suggestions about how people can follow you. I know Jessica and Mel, you guys are writers. Tonya, I'm not sure where people might follow you, but let's start with Jessica. How could people follow you if they want to learn more about what's going on in your life?
I think if you want to follow the stories of our adventure overseas, I write on Medium, and I'm just on there as Jessica Simmons. I'm also happy if people wanted to send me an email with a question. It's just jessica.anne.simmons, simmons@gmail.com. Happy to help you on this journey.
Fantastic. Thank you. Like I said, folks out there, such a connected group and so empathetic and so ready to help. Mel, anything to add, or Cole?
Yeah, if anybody wants to follow me and kind of see how my first year went, a little bit into this year, it's theglobetravellerswife.com. I write on there every few months, I'd say. If they want to send me an email too, I got a couple of emails last year from some people who listen to the podcast too. So it's mel.idema@gmail.com.
That's fantastic. And of course, I love the Globe Traveler's Wife reference. I'm thinking to Time Traveler's Wife, which was such a good book. So very, very clever, and glad to hear that you are keeping up with your writing as often as you can. Tonya, anywhere people can follow you?
Yeah, the best way is probably Instagram. So it's just Tonya_Busse, all lowercase. And then, yeah, I wanted to add, I did get a few messages from the last podcast as well of people, and it was really encouraging to me too. So I love a message on there. I'm also on Facebook or TikTok, but it's just the same thing. It would just be my name. And yeah, feel free to follow. I was posting more at the beginning, and then once I got busy, it's kind of tapered, but I'm always happy to respond to a message.
And now, because of this show, you're inspired to start posting more
And
often
yes,
again.
absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. It's been such a pleasure to see you all again and touch base. And thanks for taking the time.
So just as Audrey's been saying, you all are learners, you've got growth mindsets, you've gone for it. And really, I appreciate the advice that you've shared and you've given us some of your time. I'm really excited for our listeners who are going to get to hear from all your different perspectives. Because before that, I was thinking we have two married couples, one with children, and we have a single person. And we have a couple that's been working at a school for 2 years. So we have a pretty good variety of international educators here. So thanks for taking the time. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us today on Educators Going Global.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and all the other usual suspects.
Please subscribe, like us, and leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and let your teaching friends know about us so we can grow our community.
Please reach out at educatorsgoingglobal@gmail.com and join our Facebook group, Educators Going Global, if you have ideas, comments, or wish to share a Going Global story of your own.
You can also find us on Instagram at Educators Going Global.
Please visit our website as well, www.educatorsgoingglobal.com. All our podcast episodes are on there by topic, along with blog posts, Going Global stories, and our ever-growing resource library. For now, this is Audrey
And David.
inviting you to travel,
Teach.
and connect with us.